Larry Blustein is going to join the show today, and he's going to give his opinion on what's going wrong with the Noles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. And today, I bring on the great Larry Blustein. Been around this for a long time, South Florida native, followed Florida State for a very long time. Larry, good to have you on the show. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you, Brian.
For joining. Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Right in the middle of the busiest time of year, obviously. I mean, although we say the off season is because that's where you get your research, but right now everything's popping from college to high school, and great time to be a football fan.
It is, unless you're a Florida State fan.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm just gonna let you give your however long you want, Larry. We were talking off air, like the difference between last year and this year with Florida State's transfer portal success. Give your thoughts, let people know what you think.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing. And you and I talked about balance, Brian, and that's the thing. Yeah, you want to bring in kids, and you want to bring in 21, 22 years old, year old kids, because sometimes the 17, 18-year-old players aren't ready yet. And that's fine in this, this age of the transfer portal to find balance. But what FSU's done, and that's not including this year where they've started the recruit, but last couple of years, they didn't do well in high school recruiting. And so what happened was when they lost two big-time defensive linemen, a quarterback that really made the team go, a running back, two secondary kids, and two offensive linemen, they really had nothing behind it. They didn't really hit the portal as well this year. So they didn't have that type of generational talent. And then they couldn't look to their recruiting because they didn't have it. Now, I mean, if you're a Seminole fan, I mean, obviously you're disappointed in what's going on now, but it seems like what's happened over there is I think that, Coach Norvell's kind of, the bell went off because this coming class, the 25 class, Solomon Thomas and Javion Hilson and, kids like Kevin Wynn and Peyton Johnson, which are all 4 type of stars. Solomon's a 5-star. But the thing is they didn't do it early enough. And, the kids that they brought in, a couple of them were busts, and a couple of them I told them that weren't going to be as good that we know, a certain receiver from South Florida who they put all their stock into. But that's what's happening, and it's not time to panic. Obviously, this year is going to be tough because of the fact that they didn't balance it. They didn't bring in, if you're going to rely on the portal, and they probably relied on the portal more than anybody, and good and bad. The good was last year when they were undefeated, and that was due to the success of the portal, not so much recruiting. Now that you look back, I was looking back at the 24, 23 classes in recruiting, and the good kids that they did get have not worked out for them, and they never developed. This is something that the previous regime did that they didn't work out. Their recruiting didn't work out. Now, like I said, they've made amends with this next 2025 class by getting some really good kids. But even they have to work out. I mean, I figure guys like Thomas and Javion Hilson will work out fine. I mean, those kids are kind of the type of players. But right now, Brian, what's going on in Tallahassee is they bought in too much to the portal and didn't back up what they lost. And that's the reason why they're having some problems. I mean, they're not a horrible team. They're just a team that doesn't have the depth. They don't have a couple of frontline kids. They don't have a playmaker. I think they just, I mean, I got to say it, but they settled at quarterback. When they couldn't get Cam Ward, they just said, okay, let's take, him. And because, I mean, to me, if it didn't work out at Oregon State and it didn't work out at Clemson, I know coaches have ego. Oh, well, I'll get this out of him. I'll make him into this. You just can't. He's not a leader. His throwing is not very accurate. Sure, he doesn't have the receivers that he had in Keon last year and Big Johnny, who was 6'6" or whatever. But at the same time, you expect somebody who's 23 years old to come in here and be more of a leader. And he's not. And, and that's the thing. If you put all your eggs in one basket, like Florida State did, with the quarterback position, that's what you get. And, it's going to be a tough year for them unless they find some way to get other players involved. Do they turn to their quarterback who was recruited? Who's next? In a couple of weeks, you may have to. I mean, obviously, you have a couple of games where they, maybe even the record up. But after that, doesn't get any easier. They got to play Notre Dame. They got to play Miami. They've, it's not. You play Clemson, so it's not going to be an easy road for them. But that, if you really want to put your finger on what's gone on, that's it. They didn't create the balance that you and I talked about. And when you're using the portal, we use Miami as a perfect example. Yeah, Miami's 12-13 over the last 2 years, but what happened was he's revamped that roster to the point where 2 years ago he's got 67 new players. It's not like Deion Sanders, who wipes everything out and doesn't really think about the build. Miami's thinking about the build. Yeah, you had Cam Ward, and you had Martinez, and you had Brown, and you had a whole defensive line like Barron and those type of guys. But Miami's got studs coming right behind them that they recruited. The entire offensive line. It was rebuilt. Mawanoa, Okunlolo, Rivers. They were all kids that they recruited and not so much got through the portal. And, other than the center, Zach Carpenter. And that's what I'm saying. That's what Florida State didn't do. They didn't recruit well the last couple of years. And right now, it's sort of like, they tell you to drink a gallon of water the night before so you don't cramp up. They're trying to drink their gallon of water now. And the problem is it happened in the past. Just my opinion.
I think it's really interesting that Florida State hit at such a high rate, though, on the guys they brought in last year. It was exponential. It was unbelievable.
No doubt.
They also got lucky. People forget Verse was there 2 years.
Yes. Yeah,
he hadn't come back last year. I mean, that guy, he literally threw a Florida offensive lineman into the quarterback.
Yeah. No, so, I'm not disagreeing with you. It is a crapshoot these days. And, you don't, like you said, like Miami's going to have to find out. They're going to have, they have Cam Ward for a year. They're going to have Brown for a year. They're going to have Martinez for a year, maybe 2 if he stays. But you've got to get lucky. But at the same time, if you don't get lucky, Brian, in the portal, you've got to do with programs like Ohio State and Notre Dame, and you got to have a good base of recruiting. And that's what's gone away from college football so much, because I walk around and, I go to all over the state, and that's the one thing that the high school coaches tell me. The art of recruiting is gone. Colleges will come down here and get the 1-2 kids, but it's not like they're getting 8 and 9 anymore. Because they're so brainwashed into thinking that the portal is going to be the savior. And it's, was for Florida State last year, but that just shows you, it gives you a lesson. It gives Coach Norvell a lesson that you just can't rely on the portal, because if you do, it becomes, like I said, it becomes a crapshoot. Last year it worked out. This year, not so much. And that's why I always say you have to have a backup plan. And Miami's gotten all their defensive linemen, from the portal. But you all have guys like Bain, and you have other guys that are coming right behind them that they recruited. So that's what happens. And Florida State's inability to really hit the recruiting trail the last 2 years and get kids that are working out, it's coming back at them right now.
I think the 24 class has potential, but relying on freshmen,
no.
You and I know is
no.
Like even the studs that Miami signed this year is an example, like the kid from Chicago and stuff. They're not going to play right away. You need a year to adapt.
Right.
So if you miss on a class, which Florida State before this past year, like the current sophomore and junior classes, how many of those guys from the high school ranks that are on the Noles roster are going to play at the NFL level?
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably not the clip that you would expect when you say Florida State Seminoles. So I agree with your point. So now here's the other thing that I find this is the one in particular that I don't understand. Marvin played at American Heritage, goes to Georgia, transfers to Florida State. Physically, out of all the guys that transferred, I thought, okay, it's fine time for him to kind of step up. He didn't do much at Georgia, but he's got like 2 tackles, Larry. You probably know that kid 10 times better than me. Tell me what's going on. That was one I would have taken. Because like the God-given gifts there, and obviously his dad was unbelievable. What is wrong with that? Like, where am I wrong here?
Well, sometimes and people point their fingers in a lot of directions, but sometimes it comes down to coaching. Coaches have to be accountable sometimes for not that, when Mario Cristobal got to Miami, the one thing that, I sat down in his office with him. I've known him since he was in youth football. So we sat and he says, what's the problem here? He says, it looks like Miami gets the talent. I said, Coach, what it is they're not getting coached up. And sometimes that happens. And sometimes that, somebody like Coach Norvell is going to have to look deep inside and see why they're not being able to take these athletes, and translate them, to, like you said, being those dominant players that they were before. I mean, you look back at that 24 class, and I know Charles Lester, and then they also have Jamari Howard, who I watch. I mean, a really good secondary class in there. Kai Bates, so those type of kids, should be able this year to be, like you said, getting a lot of reps, being ready. So when this group of transfer portals move on and they don't fill those needs, you fill them with those type of studs in the secondary. With what they've got the last 2 classes, 23, 24, they should have one of the best secondaries in the ACC over the next couple of years. But you know what? A lot of people, and remember this, you got to win to recruit. And that's the one thing Miami was lucky, because I told people, people living in Washington and Des Moines, Iowa, and South Bend, Indiana, all they view Miami as is a 13 or 15 and 14 and 15 team, whatever they were over the last 2 years. And this is a big surprise how they've done that. Now, Florida State, and they're not going to, they'll win them, they'll go to a bowl. I mean, they're going to win. It's just not, they're not going to win the ACC. It's just, and let's face it, I'm not going to stick up for Georgia Tech or Boston College, but they're not terrible, and that's the thing I'm saying, those teams, see, fans in all over the country, and, I grew up watching USC. And all those USC fans felt, oh, we got this kid, we got that kid. But everybody else in the conference aren't going to sit on their damn hands while you're recruiting. They're also going to look to get better. And, you look at Brent Key and what he's done. It's his alma mater, Georgia Tech. He's added some really good offensive linemen. He's added some playmakers. Same thing with Boston College. I mean, you look at they got a coach now who's been there, done that. And you look at a Castellanos, he's got to be as good as anybody, looking at a quarterback. Now, he's light years better than DJU. He really is, because here's a kid that gets it. He really is. I mean, he was that good last year. It's just Boston College wasn't, they were promoted. But that's the way it is. I mean, you look at Wake Forest. How did they get good for all those years? I mean, they were amongst the top 3-4 teams in the ACC every year there for a while. But that's what happens. Those teams aren't sitting on their hands while you're recruiting and saying, well, we got this kid. Well, what do you think they're going to get? And that's the one thing that I think passed FSU by, is the ability to click on a lot of these kids. And you don't always, it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, you've been around Notre Dame. You see a lot of kids that came in, it didn't work out. I mean, it just happens everywhere. But you have to have a better success rate than Florida State's had.
Yeah, they've missed on evaluations.
Yeah.
I've studied Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Auburn. I've studied everybody, and it's weird how the cycles go like that.
Yeah.
Because you'll have somebody come in and we're all convinced, okay, this guy's going to play early. Then at his junior year, you're like, whatever happened to so-and-so? Sometimes that does happen too. It's just like, well, Florida State, it was just super high they hit. And then this year, I mean, their transfers, it's like the earth just exploded.
Yeah.
So
and when you lose, Brian, it becomes more magnified. And that's the thing.
100%.
Yeah. So that's what happens. Now, if they won those 2 games, we wouldn't be sitting here talking.
No, if they'd have won by a field goal, even and playing bad, the W changes the perception. 100%.
and you would overlook the problem that still exists. And, you know, all these fans at FSU could say what they want. You know, one of my buddies, Charles Fishbein, who's a big FSU fan, he writes for me, knows all about FSU. He said the same thing 2 years ago. He says, they're just not recruiting well. And the kids that they're getting, they're not hitting on. And you know, I mean, look at the other day, you know, in some of these games where freshmen, you know, at Ohio State, when obviously Jeremiah Johnson's a little different breed, but I was watching a lot of games where a lot of true freshmen were playing and making an impact and getting their feet wet. See, Florida State has to learn that, you know, you just said you just can't thrust a bunch of freshmen in there, and you're 100% right. But you can sprinkle them in like Miami did with O.J. Federico at defensive back. And he started, you know, I mean, so that happens. But you know what? This is the days of the Duke Johnsons when he had when Miami was on probation and USC was on probation. The thing that separated the two teams is USC went out and got 5-star linemen and 2-star running backs. Miami got 2-star linemen and 5-star running backs. And to me, it's all what you do in recruiting. And, you know, a lot of teams don't get it. Florida State's going to have to get it quick. You know, I mean, like I said, they have a great class going now, but they have to not only hit on them, but they've got to develop these kids. And, you know, and if they're going to rely on the transfer portal, they're going to have to understand that, yeah, they're going to only be here for a year. Maybe, like you said, in Bursa's case, 2 years, but you've got to have have guys that you've recruited. And look at some of the Alabama's and program. Alabama loses more kids, you know, that become everybody else's transfer portal. But they have
Florida State included.
Yeah, Florida State's a perfect example. And, you know, last year with Miami with Javion Cohen. I mean, it just happens like that. When you're really, really good and you recruit like, you know, Alabama and Georgia and those programs like that, sometimes the kids who could really start at other places get a little bit, you know, they get a little bit bored of being a second team when they're a 4-star All-American. And that's what happens. And, you know, if Florida State, you know, I mean, I knew back before the season started, and I'm not going to be, you know, somebody that's going to say, well, I knew, but DJ is not, he's just not a guy that takes you to that next level. It's proven. He's proven it at 2 places. And I know they settled. They tried real hard. I know they backed up the Brinks truck for Cam Ward, as did a few people. I mean, you know, also you look at, you know, at other, you know, that are other quarterbacks that were in that group. You know, Ohio State lands one, you know, these guys, Will Howard, you know, guys like that. I mean, they end up, you know, at a position where they could help this team, and everybody knew they were playing at a high level. You know, Oregon State didn't, you know, blow everybody away last year. And yeah. And that's the thing. And you give these kids money like that. There's too.
The other part.
Yeah, that's the worst part. You know, I mean, I'm old school, but I mean, I understand. And I said this from the beginning when they were talking about the NIL deals. I said, I have nothing wrong with college athletes, Brian, you know, being compensated, you having enough money to do this and do that, you know, like on a Saturday night, all the guys are going out to clubs, but you don't have any money, those type of things. They're out to dinner or, you know, that's what I originally thought this thing was going to be. I didn't think it was going to be $5 million deals like Shedeur Sanders has. You know, I mean, it's and he really doesn't need the money. His family, I'm sure, is pretty well off. But yeah, you know, and that's the thing about you. You look at Nick Saban, who had the most to say about it, but yet his freshman quarterback Bryce Young was making $2.2 million before he ever even snapped the ball. So there's a problem, and I think that. Nothing wrong with giving these kids money because obviously their revenue, they make the revenue at a lot of these schools. But I've always said I'd give the NIL deals, but the first year they don't get it. You know, the second year they'll get kicked in for them, but the first year they just come and, you know, be the regular as everybody else is. Second year should kick in, just like the portal. I think if you transfer, you got to sit out a year because if not, you're going to have this. You know, kid gets upset at practice. I quit. I'm going somewhere else. There's no discipline anymore. This isn't like it was back in the day, but it's different times. That's why I said I don't begrudge people from transferring, and I don't begrudge them for making money. But there's got to be something there that slows the process just a tad. Anyway,
that's where the part gets really funky, because you're getting into legal discourse.
Yeah,
because the government's in that stuff, and we both know that's everybody just trying to win over votes. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
Trust too many politicians. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, and that's part of it. I'm hoping that the House case that'll impact next season, and I think it's 22%. I forget what it is, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
it's
a lot of money.
So hopefully kids I don't know how they're going to do it, but like if you come in and you didn't get a bunch of upfront money and you get hurt in practice one, they need to have money for those kids.
I agree. And
as long as they do that, it would be huge, because there wouldn't be as much upfront like guys getting bought, in my opinion.
And in DJU's case, he should think a lot more of learning how to run this offense than he does buying the kids beats before they go to, on their trip. Yeah. I mean, everyone, look at, he make the, but he's sponsored and all that. And that's nice. But you know what? You got to perform. And if you don't perform, just like all these, Florida, the state of Florida is probably the most embarrassingly low state in the country for paying their high school coaches. It's a joke how low they are. And look at all the prospects that come out of the state of Florida. But that being said, if you go coach in Alabama, or you coach in Georgia, or you coach in Texas, and you make those $130,000 salaries, and they give you a truck and all this stuff, if you don't win, your butt will be right back where you came from.
Yeah, winning
is everything. Is everything.
Yeah. So, well, Larry, I truly appreciate you coming on. You and I were pretty much two peas in a pod on this. I think it's going to be a year or so, at least next year, from what I've learned from this season, before Florida State can kind of get a balance. It may even be the 26th season.
Yeah.
But but it's ironic. Today, I don't know if you saw, Isaiah Williams committed to Florida State, the linebacker. He's a 26 kid. I'm getting ready to do a podcast on him. He's really good.
He's a beast. He's a beast.
And he committed after Florida State started 0-2.
Yeah, well,
recruiting's wild.
See, that's the thing, too, is there's a lot. I mean, because like I said, look at all those kids that Miami got when they were 6-6 and losing to Rutgers and, the Pinstripe Bowl. So, somebody like Isaiah Williams, I mean, he's at a smaller school in Tavares, and a lot of people don't know about him. I mean, So, but the kid is a beast. He's a beast. But, that's the thing. Florida State, somewhere along the line, may lose a lot of these 25 kids if they don't start, getting some W's. And, they can't. Florida State, because of where they were last year and because of all the talk that went on, hey, we should have been in the, in the playoffs, which I think they should have. Anytime you finish 13-0 in a Power 5 situation, you definitely should. I don't care what conference you are, so that, to me, and I think Coach Norvell's a great coach. I really do. I like him. He's a great person. He's really, and you can see the fire. I just didn't like after the first game where he took the, took the responsibility, because it didn't sound very well saying, well, it's our fault. We didn't have you prepared. You had 8 months to get ready for that game. I mean, it's not a good look when you start taking the blame that way. You could just say, you know what? It was our fault. Maybe we didn't do this and that, but don't say we weren't ready, because that's just not a good look.
Well, Larry, I appreciate it. I will have you again very soon.
Look forward to it. Anytime, Brian. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll be right back with you, Larry. Folks, thank you very much. Please like this podcast. Please subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. We will be back again tomorrow. Take care, y'all.